Hi, Lois here. I want to record my second podcast, and this is a little preview of a program that I'm doing by invitation of Anthroposophy in Toronto. And together with my friend Grant Davis, we'll be covering for the second time, I did this 5 years ago, covering Atlantis. That is the prehistory of the earth before the flood being the famous story of the ending of Atlantis. And we're going to be covering that in 3 online sessions beginning September 10th. I'll put information below for signing up. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a preview because there's a lot of information floating around about Atlantis. Now, I am going to be speaking according to Rudolf Steiner. Now, and also from a theosophist who was gave a very important talk and lecture on Atlantis before Steiner, and Steiner referenced him, W. Scott-Elliot, and he said he's not going to cover the same material. So we've sourced from both in order to give you a bigger picture. Now, both of these men were highly developed spiritual leaders, and they could both read in the Akashic record. And that is where this information comes from. It's not from any written records. It's not from Plato. It is directly by reading the record of everything that happens on Earth that is recorded in what's known as the Akashic record. It takes a very advanced adept to be able to do that. And there are some dangers involved, but getting too much of your personality in the way can skew the information. And it's a very tricky thing to do. But these two men, their information matches. They say to any adept reading in the Akashic record will be seeing the same thing, as long as they can get themselves out of the way and they have the right vision. I'm going to give you a little sneak preview by talking about Lucifer and when Lucifer entered into human evolution, which happened at this time period that we're going to be covering, the Atlantis time period. We're talking, it ended 12,000 years ago. It went on for a few 100,000 years. So it's a very large epoch, much like our own, which began with the flood and is only at the 5th of 7 stages. So we've got a long way yet to go if we keep the earth together long enough to make it. So Atlantis, before Atlantis in the age of Lemuria, the earth was hardening too quickly, and the bodies were hardening so fast that they would not be able to evolve further. Humans would not be able to leave their bodies and reincarnate. All of that would not happen. The bodies were too hard. So the divine spirit beings who created us and the planet, we are the planet. The planet began with only, according to Steiner, only like a blackberry of all the human entities. And even the rocks and trees and everything emanated out of us. We are the planet. So to clarify that, we weren't made on Mars and teleported back here, although we will be covering the Mars contributions in our longer talk. Now, back to Lucifer. When the divine spiritual beings saw it was necessary to remove the harder materials from the earth, that was extracted through the Pacific Ocean, and the moon was created out of these hardened materials. And with it went beings who could survive in that. And gradually then, with the removal of that hardening process, the earth became soft. The bodies, the human bodies, became permeable for human souls to reincarnate into. What had happened in between was we had to move into bodies on the planets in our solar system. We are one system, the sun being the center. So when we leave our bodies, we go through our whole system with the sun at the center. So we weren't able to come back into bodies on Earth. So we went into bodies on the other planets. But with this removal of the moon began the era known as Atlantis, and the human souls going through their sojourn through the planetary realm between incarnations could return into the bodies provided by Earth, their homeland. So Atlantis began to be peopled by Earth souls again, and this moment of chaos was an opportunity, an opening for the Luciferic beings to enter in. Now, in their own evolution, they were not able, this group of beings were not able to progress to the level of exousiae. Now, to place that where humans above us, angels, archangels, archai, then above them are the dunamis, Kyriotades, and exousiae. So it's a very sublime, there's another hierarchy above that, and then the Godhead. So it is a very sublime level we're speaking of. They are very high beings, the Luciferic beings, but they're retarded. They were unable to make the grade to exousiae. During that time in Atlantis, the exousiae were adding to what we had as a physical body, an etheric life force body, and an emotional astral body. They were adding the ego so that we could feel ourselves separated from the environment. We began Atlantis fully clairvoyant, but unable to realize that we were separate from our environment. We were embedded in the whole thing, much like a baby does not know it's separate from its environment. So there we were, receiving our individuality from the exousiae, and those beings who ought to have been working in that way could only reach to the level below that, which is the astral body, which is the body of emotions. So the Luciferic beings rebelling because they were not able to make the grade, also in a way, they're not making the grade and working into us was in a way a sacrifice on their part. So we have to recognize that as well. However, they were very naughty, and they put in desires and longings into the human emotional body that would never be there if it were not for their intervention. With the divine spiritual leadership, our desires would always be for our better good, and we would never want anything that would be bad for us. Can you imagine? I mean, that was what we were supposed to be like. We were supposed to see clairvoyantly everything around us, but then we were going to see the physical side of things, but also the spiritual side of things woven together with them. So we would see a physical plant and the etheric life body of the plant and the plant spirit in the higher realm of lower Devacon. That would all be visible to us. But through the work of the Luciferic beings, we only saw the physical world. We evolved too quickly to integrate those two factions together, and we developed the ability for evil. So that was in Atlantis. The Luciferic beings have not been acting into us in any era since. Before that, not through Polaris, not through Hyperborea, not through Lemuria, only in Atlantis. So they are a later addition, a cross purpose to our evolution, the Luciferic beings. Now, we are at a point now coming back to being able to see the spiritual within the physical, behind the physical, around the physical. That is where we are in our development now. We are fully separated. We are fully identifying as self. And now we are to develop our clairvoyant faculties to see the spiritual in the physical world and go beyond the physical world into the spiritual world. Now, to do that, we have to overcome the Luciferic work within our astral body, which means purifying your desires so you don't want anything that is bad for you. So that doing something evil or against the rightful path of human development is just not anything you would ever want to do. You don't have any desire for it whatsoever. And that is our gateway. This is what we call the purification of the astral body. And if we do that, we will develop clairvoyant vision, and not just clairvoyance. We have clairaudience, hearing beyond the physical sound, hearing spirit give us messages, and all the clairs, clair knowing, and so on and so forth. Gigi Young does a wonderful course on the clairs. I recommend her, gigiyoung.com. That is what I wanted to talk about today. There'll be information below how to access that. And I'll just close with a quick eurythmy, A-E-I-O-U. And speaking of the planets, I'm going to add the planets to what we did last time. Here we go. Oh, remember all was open to the world in wonder? That's Venus. The Venus capacity is opening yourself to the world and receiving. Venus receives, invites to receive. A, Mars. I block it off. I do not want to receive that. So I block it. I shield myself. I feel very strong against it. I'm asserting myself against what I do not want. A. E. Remember, we were reaching down. This is Mercury, and Mercury has to do with healing. So we're taking the substance from the earth, from the plants, from the animals, from the minerals, that's healing. And we're receiving information about how it is we're to apply them and what it is in the healing of the individual in front of us that needs to be addressed. This is Mercury. E, Mercury. O, Jupiter. O is reaching out, fusing with, becoming one with what we're interested in, sending our soul out into that, embracing it, and thereby the wisdom comes to us. Jupiter, wisdom, O. Ooh, ooh, Saturn. Ooh, Saturn the oldest form of wisdom that we have. Saturn, ooh, it's narrow, and it's the color I'm wearing. Saturn is a deep indigo blue. Saturn. Venus, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn. Thank you for watching. See you again soon.